Good evening on this wonderful Hump Day Wednesday. And I have had with me tonight a very long-awaited guest of mine. Very long. Mr. Eric Altman. King Bigfoot. Whenever I hear Bigfoot, I automatically think of you. I think you're awesome. So I'm happy you're here and going to spend some time with me and my brewskis. How are you, Eric?
I'm doing good. Thanks. How are you?
Good. So happy to see you back in the swing of things and planning a huge Bigfoot camping adventure in September that me and my peaches are attending, and we cannot wait. But before we get into that, because I really, really want you to talk about that, for those of you that do not know Mr. Eric Altman, Eric, can you just take us to the beginning and kind of just tell us, where you started, how you got into it, and how you got to where you are right now?
Sure. I've been doing this a long time. Probably 90% of my life I've been involved in looking for Bigfoot and other strange creatures and fascinated by the paranormal and UFOs. I grew up with an interest in monster movies. That was my thing as a kid. I loved monster films, the werewolves, the Dracula, vampires, Frankenstein's monster, all those things. So about 10 years old, I used to watch programs, Sunday afternoon matinee movies after I get home from church. And they always had really bad, if you remember them, really bad B black and white movies and movies from the 1970s on. And a movie came on one Sunday afternoon called Legend of Boggy Creek. And it's a docudrama about a little small town in Arkansas called Fouke, Arkansas. And in this town of Fouke, Arkansas, the people that lived there were terrorized by this upright walking, hair-covered monster, or Bigfoot creature, if you will. And this movie was about their experiences. It was probably one of the first of its kind to do recreations of people's sightings. So I was just captivated. And the movie, of course, is based on supposed true events that took place in 1970 through 72. The movie was created and directed by a guy named Charles Pierce, and he had heard about all the activity on there. So he went down in 73 and filmed it and put the movie out. And that was my first introduction of Bigfoot. I was about 10 years old when I saw that. And I was automatically hooked. I had to know if this thing was real. So I went to the public library and started reading every book I could find on it. And there was a book by John Green called Apes Among Us, Sasquatch Apes Among Us. And in the book, they talked about Bigfoot sightings in my hometown. And I was really shocked to hear about that and to read about it. So I decided to see if there was any newspaper articles about Bigfoot in my hometown. And I was blown away to find out, sure enough, there were dozens upon dozens, if not hundreds, of Bigfoot sightings that have taken place in my hometown over the years. And that 1973 year, when Legend of Boggy Creek came out, there was a huge flap of Bigfoot sightings in my hometown. And I was also very surprised to find out there was a guy named Stan Gordon who lived in my hometown and investigated UFOs and strange creature reports, strange reports of the paranormal. So I started educating myself from that point forward, learning as much as I could, reading everything I could. searching out anything I could on TV. Leonard Nimoy's In Search of, Monsters and Mysteries in America. Um, One of the other Bigfoot movies that really got me motivated was a movie called Creature from Black Lake. It was a fictional movie, but again, it was set in the Louisiana, Arkansas area at a place called Caddo Lake, and a fictional town called Oil City. And two college kids went looking for a Bigfoot-like creature and had a pretty unfortunate. The newspaper articles, the books really got me motivated to start looking into the phenomenon. And the fact that there was a guy that actually looked into this stuff living in my hometown. So fast forward about 3 years till I was about 13 years old. My parents would take me to our local mall where Stan Gordon would appear during the summer months. He'd spend a weekend out there and he'd have a UFO and Bigfoot display from, I think it was like the late 1970s throughout probably mid 90s. He would do this once this summer. He'd set up a huge display at the mall where he'd have Bigfoot casts, UFO photographs, newspaper articles, and just so much evidence he would put on display, kind of like what you see at the conferences now. And my parents took me out there when I was 13 on a weekend during the summer, and I met Stan. And for a 13-year-old kid, I was fully expecting him to kind of blow me off and say, "Hey, go away, kid, you're bothering me." But the entire weekend I spent at the mall talking to him. He answered every question I had. Talked with me in great lengths about some of the casts, some of the cases. I rattled off cases that I had read that he investigated, and from that point forward, we began a friendship and a mentorship. And fast forward to 2023, we've been friends now for 40 years, and
Wow.
I've investigated with him over the years. We travel together to events. He's my mentor. He's been my mentor for 40 years, but he and I have investigated so many cases together. I've learned so much from him. But as I grew up through my teens and into my early 20s, following his work, um, I wanted to really try to get involved in doing what he did. So when I hit my college years, I kind of dropped off. I did do a little bit of research in college, investigated some local legends and stuff like that around our campus up in northwestern Pennsylvania. But I really put it on the back burner to kind of concentrate on getting an education. And then once I graduated from college, I kind of got back into it again. I really started hot and heavy looking into cases, driving around areas where there have been cases historically, and looking at the area for myself, learning the area, becoming familiar with the wildlife, the terrain, the habitat, the food sources, to see if maybe I could figure out what it takes for an animal like this to exist and live in and survive. And I got married in 1997. I didn't tell my wife about it until after we were married. And once,
Really?
yeah, she didn't know about it until after we were married. But once we were married and we moved back to Pennsylvania, I got full blown into actively field investigating. Um, at the time, I joined a group called the BFRO, the Bigfoot Field Research Organization, which was just in its infancy. And they made me a point of contact for Pennsylvania. I kind of went from there to joining a group called the Pennsylvania Bigfoot Society. And I took over that group as the group's director in 2000. And I've been running that group now for, 23 years. And have been field investigating for maybe 25 years now, 26 years, something like that. And
Mhm.
studying the phenomenon for about 43 years. So that's the short version of how I got involved in this and what I put into the field.
I mean, it's fantastic. So I have a couple of questions, naturally. Um, so your your passion always started with Bigfoot, because I find a lot of people will get into the paranormal stuff, and then, like myself, I can say myself, like first I was all paranormal stuff, and then I slowly started to learn about cryptids and Bigfoots and UFOs and stuff like that. Like I was never, I have gone Bigfoot hunting once, only once, and it was interesting. Um, I find that the investigative process kind of is a little parallel to the paranormal stuff, but just there's different techniques used, but still it's kind of like, uh, kind of parallels. Um, Now, have you ever gotten like substantial evidence or really good evidence of in your 25 years of field investigating, of the presence of Bigfoot?
Um, I've had many encounters over the years with something that I can't identify as common wildlife that I suspect may have been a Bigfoot. I can't say for sure because I didn't see the animal, but I've heard howls and screams, wood knocks, um, all kinds of weird noises. I've found footprints on my own, and I've been directed to places where footprints have been discovered. I've made several castings over the years. A couple of cases where I've pulled hair off of broken branches, broken bushes, sent them away to be looked at by primatologist Dr. Jeff Meldrum. I'm sure you're familiar with him. Um, there's been several times where we found hair and we sent them off to be investigated and looked at. So I wouldn't call it conclusive evidence because it hasn't proven the animal existed. I call it more of circumstantial or anecdotal evidence. It supports something was there, and it was enough to warrant further investigation, further study, but it conclusively didn't prove that Bigfoot exists. So evidence has been found in my cases that I've investigated, footprints, recordings of strange audible, whatever you want to call it, screams, howls, grunts, growls, whoops, primate-like whoops, footprints. Yeah, it's pretty much the gambit. We found what most people whoops are what a primate might make, and it's really hard to replicate it. But if you're at a zoo and you hear like a primate doing that whoop 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 whoop, that kind of
Okay.
sound,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
we've heard that before, but much louder and much longer in duration. The field as whoops. It's an animal that typically is associated with a primate that would make that sound.
So is in your belief, I mean, what do you believe Bigfoot is? Do you believe it to be, a mammal? Do you believe it to be, I mean, do you have a theory as to what Bigfoot is?
Well, that's a rabbit hole,
Yeah,
a
I'm
very
sure.
deep rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Um, when I got into this back in the 1980s, when I really started researching it, I thought Bigfoot was just an undiscovered primate that hasn't been classified yet, a very elusive undiscovered primate with a small population spread out across the globe. And the longer I'm in this, the more I'm leaning towards it being still a primate, but something that we're just not familiar with the attributes that it has or the abilities that it has. Because there have been situations where I've been in the woods, and as I mentioned earlier, I'm pretty sure what I was in the woods with was a Bigfoot or in the presence of something I can't identify. And the animal wasn't displaying your typical animal wildlife behavior. Whatever this thing was doing things that it shouldn't have done. And what I mean by that is the ability to stay hidden from thermal flare, not giving off a heat signature when there should be a heat signature there. That's probably one of the most unique things that I've come across personally. But talking through the hundreds of cases I've investigated and talked to eyewitnesses, they're telling me this animal does things that a normal animal like a deer, a bear, a mountain lion, a raccoon, a possum shouldn't do. They're disappearing in front of them without a trace. They're leaving footprints, a trail of footprints that suddenly just end. There's no continuation of the footprints. The ability, how it moves so quickly and so gracefully for such a large animal. Again, these are things that this animal's doing that really defies logic of what we're used to in the zoological world. It has attributes that we're not familiar with, and it may have the ability to camouflage itself so well, blending in with its environment and surroundings, that it may appear to disappear to people when it's actually just hiding in plain sight. So to answer your question in a long-winded way, I don't know what Bigfoot is. I don't think anybody does.
Right.
People have their ideas, their guesses, their speculations, but I don't think anyone truly has an answer what Bigfoot really is.
Yeah. And that makes sense because even on the ghost side of things, We don't know what it is that we're communicating with. You know, you get your EVPs, but you don't know where is it coming from? What is it?
Right.
You know, you know,
Yep.
and you know, so I totally get that. You know, I wanted to ask your theories, and I say theory because it is all theories, right? It's, you know, based on, you know, I know you've done a lot of research, so you can make a great educated theory, you know, an educated guess or a theory or, you know, whatever. But um are there differences between Sasquatch, Bigfoot, Yeti, you know, or are that just like names that, you know, some people will call just because, you know, just to call it?
Right. This is just my strictly my opinion, but I think we're dealing with a similar type animal. They might be subspecies of one another or cousins, if you will. They may be genetically related, but have their own differences based on the environments they live in and the parts of the world that they live in. Because obviously, they're going to develop based on their food habits and attributes that they have to survive with the habitat, and they're going to develop their own personalities. Some may be more aggressive than others, some may be larger than others, smaller. So I think they're relatively related in some way, but I don't think they're all the same creature. And what I mean by that is in the Pacific Northwest, they're normally described as docile and more inquisitive, curious creatures. They're not aggressive. We're in the Southwest, or the Southeast, I should say, like in Florida and the panhandle of Texas, Louisiana, the Gulf Coast. They're thought to be more aggressive and more territorial, and they display more aggressive behaviors. They're described as thinner, not as built and massive and muscular as they are in the Pacific Northwest. Again, it may be because of food sources they have to live off of. It may be the terrain that they're surviving in. It might be the people that they're coming in contact with. They may deal with more hunters and aggressive people in the Gulf Coast and the Texas woods or Louisiana and the swamplands, whereas the Pacific Northwest, they may be dealing with more passive people that are just out hiking. So, just on my speculation on it, I think we're dealing with some kind of similar creature, but it has different characteristics, different qualities about it, and they may be a subspecies or even cousins, if you will.
So Bigfoot would be the granddaddy, and then they have you know, it has been discovered that there are similar creatures, but they display different, you know, the researchers and the investigators are getting different evidence and having different experiences.
Right. It depends on really what part of the world you're living in. I mean, in Nepal, the Himalayas, um, the Yeti is their granddaddy, and Bigfoot is
Oh,
a cousin. And you
oh,
know,
okay.
and in Australia, the Yowie is their granddaddy. You know,
So
it
we would
depends on where you live.
so we would never have a Yeti on the East Coast because the, you know, the Yeti is native to this part of, you know what I mean? So whoever, you know, the Bigfoot would never be where the Yeti is at because the Bigfoots are native Appalachian and this area, correct? I mean, Appalachian's a big one, right?
Yeah, and they all have different names based on locations. So again, as I mentioned, they might all be related, but it's the names are based on territories that they're found in.
Gotcha.
Like different parts of the the country, they have different names for them. Like in Texas, they call them the woolly booger. And in Florida, they call them the skunk ape.
Oh yeah,
Um,
I've heard that.
yeah, so it depends on what part of the country you're from. There's a lot of small towns and communities that have their own names for them. The Muddy Creek Monster, um, Momo from Missouri. You know, different parts of the country have different names for these creatures, and they may all, in fact, be the same creature. It's just based on territory where the people live, and
Gotcha.
that's what they call them.
Is the abominable snowman considered in that family?
Yes, he's actually part of the Yeti lore. Eric Shipton in the 1950s discovered tracks, and there was an article written about his discovery. And he's pretty much one of the guys that that called it the abominable snowman. I mean, it was in newspaper articles back in the 50s about his discovery, and that's the name it was kind of given. But it's referring to the Yeti of Nepal and the Himalayas. That's kind of two. They're both kind of the same thing. It's just the natives call him the Yeti. America anglicized it to the abominable snowman.
Right. Okay. So theories on this is the biggest thing. I know I have done it myself. No disrespect, Eric. But a lot of people will say, well, how come no skeletons are ever found? Bones. What's your theory behind that?
That's a great question. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I don't have a specific theory behind that. I can share some of the commonly shared theories. And first and foremost is when an animal dies in the forest, and it could be any animal, a deer, a bear, any animal dies, whether it's of natural causes or killed by a hunter or hit by a car, usually within 7 to 10 days, that animal is completely decomposed, bones and all, because there's small rodents, possums, animals that come in and scavenge those bones. They spread them out. So the chances of you finding a skeletal remains of any animal in the woods, unless you stumbled across that animal right after it died, it's going to be pretty rare. And most people that are in the woods are going to see bones of bear and deer and common wildlife because there's an abundance of those animals. A Bigfoot is lesser in population and more rare, so therefore the chances of finding an animal that just died is pretty slim. And then waiting 7 to 10 days later, that body's going to be decomposed and spread out by the rodents and small wildlife that chews on the calcium and the marrow and all that. So those bones are going to be scattered and unrecognizable. That's the scientific theory as to why nothing has been discovered yet. There are other theories that speculate that Bigfoot has a social structure much like humans do, where they have a funeral type of ritual, so to speak. They bury their dead, and they take their dead off into the forest deep somewhere remote, and they bury them where no one's going to find them. And that's why we haven't found any Bigfoot remains yet. There's also the theory that floats around of a Bigfoot graveyard where they go so deep into the forest and remote areas and die like elephants do. You just don't stumble across an elephant graveyard or a mass graveyard unless you know where they're going and when they're dying. So that's another theory that's been floated around for a while. It also, and I get asked this a lot about fossilized remains, why we don't have fossilized remains. Where the sightings are taking place and where the populations of the animals seem to be, the ground is not conducive for fossil remains. If you'll notice, a lot of the fossils that are found are usually found out in Nevada, the West Coast, and that soil out there is conducive for the creatures, any dinosaurs or any animals, for fossil remains to be preserved. But it takes millions of years to preserve those fossils and keep them intact. So here in the East Coast, the Pacific Northwest, the Southeast, other parts of the country where there do seem to be Bigfoot populations, for some reason that area just doesn't seem conducive to create and preserve fossil remains.
Interesting. That is interesting. That's the first time I've ever had such a good explanation of that. It makes sense. There's also people that speculate about not time travel, but maybe portals. Now, I am not a believer in portals. I'm not saying that people that do believe in that stuff, hey, to each his own. I'm not discrediting anybody for their beliefs, but me personally, I don't believe in portals. However, I did watch a show on time lapse the other night. I know I just brought that up, but it was on The Unexplained with William Shatner, and I mean, it made me question everything, right? Even paranormal wise, because there could be slips in time, that either from the future or the past, you know what I mean, that we are experiencing. So then I started to think, because I knew you were coming on. So yes, I've been, trying to, think about Bigfoots, and I do call it plural all the time just always have. Um, but that what if this is a time lapse and he's from the future? Like, what if this is a future or a past creature or something like that? You know what I mean? Like coming from, I mean, we see, we have this theory of evolution, and what we looked like prior to becoming human. How we evolved from an ape-like creature. Could these Bigfoots be, back from way back then, and they're lapsing into our time, and we're getting glimpses of these creatures, and then they're going back to their time. You know what I mean?
Well, there was such a creature known as Gigantopithecus blacki that existed in the Asian countries of China, and this thing is the perfect fit for a Bigfoot. It stood about 10 to 12 feet high. It resembles what it looks like is what people describe as a Bigfoot being seen. This thing was it was more of a plant eater than anything else, but its teeth and molars have been discovered in caves in China. And they know this thing existed over 100,000 years ago. And some speculate that it came across the land bridge through Russia into Alaska and then migrated down to the United States. So let's just throw this out there, as strange as it may seem, if we're dealing with time slips, is it possible that these Gigantopithecus are still around in our time today, and that's what's being seen? And somebody asked me this a little while ago, and I had to think about it because it was an interesting question posed to me. What if perhaps we're dealing with impressions on the environment, much like ghosts impress on the environment? You have residual hauntings, and what people are seeing in areas are an energy imprinted on the environment of a Bigfoot that existed at one time that doesn't exist anymore, but people are seeing that replay of tape again. And that made me think. I thought, well, if that's happening in the spirit world and ghosts are possibly residual, maybe that's happening in the cryptid world where people are possibly seeing the Bigfoot moving through the woods, and it's actually in its own time, but it's imprinted on the environment as energy, and people are seeing that impression. It's all speculation. It's all guessing. We don't know.
Absolutely.
But it was an interesting theory that was thrown at me and really made me scratch my head.
Yeah, no, it is interesting, and maybe some of it is, but then you wouldn't be able to explain some of, and it could be some of it, like if people see them from afar, but when other people get those castings and the impressions and they find the hair, I don't think a residual type happening would be able to leave physical evidence.
You're right, absolutely right, and that's what I'm not a big fan of that theory, but that's one of the theories that's out there. And there's also a theory right now. I mentioned Stan Gordon at the beginning of the show. Stan has hypothesized that Bigfoot has the ability to leave physical, and he says it's a physical and non-physical being. What he means by that is it is able to come into our world, leave physical evidence, leave our world, and return to wherever it goes to. And that would explain the reasons why we can't find a body, why the tracks end without any explanation, why people are seeing this thing moving through the woods so quickly and then it's gone and there's no trace of it. So that's his theory he's thrown out there, is perhaps it has a physical and non-physical component. And I've talked to many eyewitnesses over the years in depth, and they've told me that they've experienced where they'll be driving down a road and all of a sudden right in front of their vehicle, this creature materializes. It doesn't come off to the left of the road, to the right of the road. It's just right in the middle of the road. Poof, it's there. It takes a couple steps and into the tree line and is gone. It almost like it manifested right in the middle of the road and moved on. I talk to more and more people like that than you would actually be surprised. It's kind of compelling to hear witness testimony. And these are coming, and granted, now eyewitness testimony can be flawed and people can be subject to hallucinations and misidentifications and all that stuff. But when you talk to them and you hear that story from more and more people who don't know each other and don't know their sightings, it's pretty compelling to hear those kind of cases.
Now, do you have people that do reach out to you when they have an experience? Like, do you kind of track where, these, I mean, obviously you have to, do you make sure that some of the claims are legitimate? Because I'm sure a lot of people will just say they saw something, but I mean, and then with that, do you, keep a, like track of where most of these sightings or occurrences are coming from?
Yeah. When I started investigating cases in 1997, I began meeting with the eyewitnesses, and it was preferably at the sighting location to look for evidence, look for footprints, look for hair, look for scat, look for any kind of physical evidence that I could corroborate with their story. And some cases we were able to find evidence to corroborate, some cases we were not. But usually, when you talk with an eyewitness, you can tell by their body language if they're making the story up or they truly had a terrifying encounter. Because a lot of people will tend to shake, tear up, become emotional. You can see the hair on their arms rise up as goosebumps. They had some
Mhm.
kind of traumatic experience, so you can't rule that out. You can't just say, "Oh, he's making that story up." That something happened to them, and it's
Right.
my job as an investigator to try to find out what they truly saw. Now, I would say 75 to 80% of the cases that I've investigated, I've walked away without any evidence to corroborate their sighting, but that doesn't mean I don't believe they had a sighting.
Right.
Some people are so detailed with their description and their experience that I leave convinced that these are credible people. They're not making up a story. They didn't have a misidentification. They saw what they claimed they saw, and to me, that's good enough. I'll document it, and on our website, pabigfoot.com, for the Pennsylvania Bigfoot Society, we have hundreds of these cases documented from all over the state of Pennsylvania and some of the surrounding states as well. And over time, you begin to see clusters of sightings based on date, location, terrain, that sort of thing. So you can kind of track them on maps to see where the sightings are taking place. The only thing that we haven't found yet is a pattern that shows where they're moving to, because they don't seem to be moving back and forth between a particular area, or they're in one area for a long period of time. We'll see a cluster of sightings in an area and then it goes dead and we don't get any sighting reports for a while. But then all of a sudden, 3 or 4 years later, they're starting to appear again back in that area. But we don't know where they go. So we don't have enough data to track their movements and to see where they're migrating or roaming to.
And again, you have to depend on people giving you that information too. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that have had experiences and either they question themselves and don't want to tell anybody because people think they're crazy,
Right.
or like me. I told you we went Bigfoot hunting because we had some guy walk in that was a security guard at some in Princeton, New Jersey, at some, it was like a park or golf. It was a long time ago. I can't 100% remember. There was other people there that might remember more details, but you know, I mean, I didn't reach out to you and give you that information. You know what I mean? Like, so, uh, and I'll tell you what, when we went and we did the investigation, I'm telling you, weird stuff happened that I can't explain, and I didn't know anything about what were the signs or some of the activities that would happen if there was a Bigfoot around, right? So I didn't know those things going into that. So afterwards, I was looking up all the things that we went through, and I'm like, oh, holy shit! Like, you check three of the boxes off, and I'm like, well, I tell everybody, I'm like, I don't know what it was, but I definitely know it was something out of the ordinary, you know.
Right.
Um, and that's all we have. Like, we don't have pictures, we don't have, I did have a recorder on, but as luck would have it, we're about to get in the cars and I turned my recorder off because we were getting in our cars, and that's when we hear that scream, squelch, yell, whatever. And I mean, like, it was loud. We were about a football and a half away from where it was coming from, and we heard it twice. We heard a loud sound, would sound like a big one, and then either it was further away or there was a smaller one, because then we heard it again and it sounded like a smaller version, if you will, of what we had just heard. And everybody looks at me like, "Did you get that?" And I'm like, "I just turned my record. I literally shut it off and was about to get in the car, and everybody, and it stopped everybody in their tracks. And as a matter of fact, somebody was in a truck with like a loud muffler. They heard it and got out of the truck. So I mean, like we were literally getting ready to go. Otherwise, my recorder would have been stayed on. But I mean, they all got out. I mean, it was definitely an interesting experience, right? Um, and another thing I remember was there was no noise in the woods. There was no animal. There was no leaves crinkling. There was no noise, and you don't realize how quiet that is until it's quiet.
Mm-hmm.
You don't hear animals. You don't hear nothing. We heard nothing. You know, and that was another thing that was weird to me because, you know, I'm very like I'm an outdoorsy person. I don't like the woods, but I am very, you know, I love, you know, walking and hiking, all that stuff, and I love animals, you know. So, you know, that was just something odd, you know, that we experienced. Everybody collectively agreed that they did not hear any normal woods noise, if you will. So I don't know where I was going with that. I was telling you my experience, but you like you were saying about getting the claims from people, and I was saying that, you know, not a lot of people tell you. So obviously, you know, you have to base on that. So um I was going to ask you something, and my thought process just went out the window. So let me ask this question. Jing, she's from Indonesia. Thank you. Have you ever heard of anything like that over in other countries?
Yes. Yeah, there's creatures in other countries. All it's a global phenomenon. This isn't just a North American phenomenon or an Australian phenomenon or an Asian phenomenon. This is a global phenomenon. There are so many countries that have their own Bigfoot-like creature or hominid-like creature. I mean, it's just unreal. I mean, there's the orang pendek. You mentioned Indonesia. And down that area, there's an orang pendek running around, a smaller version of an upright bipedal creature. So there's different animals all around the globe that have been seen and reported, and yeah, people are experiencing it. And to comment on your point, or your experience, that's happened to me, and it's happened to many, many researchers I know. We go out in the field, we set up all kinds of equipment, parabolic microphones, digital recorders, shotgun microphones, thermal FLIR cameras, drones, night vision, you name it, we have it out there, trying to capture and record sounds and video and whatever we can. And it always seems to be the case where you pack up everything, you put it away, and you're just about to climb in your truck, and you hear that long howl in the distance. Or, perfect example, my research partner Tom Mihawk and I, out in the woods, in an area that we go to, we frequent quite often. The rest of the team had left for the night, and we decided to stick around about 10 or 15 more minutes. And that, just as the team drove up the dirt road out of earshot, we heard the coyotes go crazy, and then we heard two loud, long howls. And we just looked at each other like, it figures. Everybody left, and he decides to let himself be known. Right. And that seems common. And that's, I get that question asked me quite a lot. Why isn't there better physical evidence recorded on iPhones, videos, audio? Well, there's two reasons. One, this thing seems to have a knack to do what it wants to do when it wants to do it. And either you're prepared 24/7, or you catch it with your pants down, or you're an eyewitness. You have an iPhone on your back pocket, or you have a game camera out in the woods, or whatever the case may be. You have something out there to record. You have your experience, and you're so shocked by your experience and not expecting it that you don't think about pulling up that iPhone or that camera or your audio recorder to record. You're just kind of like, oh my gosh, did I really hear that? And by the time you realize, oh my gosh, I got something to record, you pull it out, it's gone. It stopped making the noise. It ran away. It moved on, and there's nothing for you to record. So you almost have to be prepared 24/7, and don't turn that recorder off. Leave it running constantly. It has to be something that's done in the woods that's never going to stop in order to capture good evidence.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I cannot explain what, because it was like a growl, a scream, a screech, Uh, I've never heard another animal, so I can't even begin to like say what it even sounded like. I know that the hair stood up on my arms, and it was very quick, but it lasted long enough to get my heart going. Like, and it felt like it was like, and stay out. Like they were like almost like, after the fact and you're thinking about it, it was almost like we were being watched. And once we got to our cars and we were out of it was like, and stay out. You know what I mean? Like that's just how it felt, kind of like like it knew we were leaving. So then it says, then it's like, yelling, you know what I mean? Like it was
Mhm.
definitely an awesome experience, but that's the only time I've ever actually gone Bigfoot hunting.
Well,
So,
I'm glad you had some kind of experience while you were out there.
yeah, I'm hoping for the Pennsylvania Bigfoot Camping Adventure that we will experience some stuff. I'm really looking forward to it, honestly. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I used to be hard stuck on not believing in Bigfoot. And then I had that experience in Princeton, right? And I still say the jury's out. I'm not a believer, but I'm not a disbeliever. Like I believe the possibility is out there that something such as Bigfoot can exist, because I can't explain what I experienced, you know. Um, so I want to ask a Jing's question because hold on, where the heck did it go? I had it up a second ago. She asked if anybody has ever been hurt. Where did her question go? Or were there ever any reports? There it is. Has there ever been any evidence that someone that was attacked by a Bigfoot or hurt or anything like that?
Yes, there have been several documented cases over the years of people being attacked or allegedly attacked by Bigfoot. One of the more famous cases comes from Ape Canyon in Mount St. Helens in Oregon, where a group of miners were supposedly attacked by an angry tribe of Bigfoot. The miners had run-ins with the Bigfoot earlier in their weekend. They shot at these creatures, supposedly hitting one of them, knocking one down into a ravine. And later that night, the animals became very aggressive, throwing rocks and boulders at the cabin, um, trying to break into the cabin. The miners in the cabin held them off with shotguns and trying to keep them at bay. Um, that's the Ape Canyon incident, and that's how Ape Canyon in Mount St. Helen got its name. That happened in 1924. Um, that's just one example, and there have been others over the years. There is the famous Bauman case that was written by Teddy Roosevelt in his Wilderness Hunter book, where he talks about Bauman, this trapper, and his partner went into a pass in southern, I believe it was either Idaho or Iowa. It escapes me at the moment, but they went into this pass to fur trap for beavers. And while they were fur trapping, his partner was attacked and killed by some kind of bipedal creature with huge human-like footprints, had his neck broken and huge fang marks left in his neck. There have been other aggressive reports over the years. And of course, David Paulides talks about people going missing in the forests and around the world. He refers to them as the missing 411. People disappear in the forest all the time. Now, we can't say with certainty that a Bigfoot is responsible, but then again, you can't rule that out.
Right.
So there have been cases over the years. They're not a lot, but there have been documented cases where Bigfoot has been aggressive and attacked people. And it's usually because of provocation. People are shooting at it, doing something they shouldn't be doing, in a territory where they shouldn't be, the animal's territory, encroaching on young or a food source. There's always a reason. And like any wild animal, if you encroach on their young or their food source, or they don't want you in their territory, they're going to become aggressive. So
Absolutely.
yes, I think it's possible they can be aggressive, but most of the sightings and encounters that I'm aware of are docile situations where a person has an encounter with a Bigfoot and the Bigfoot takes off running the other way and the person takes off running the opposite direction. So they're very quick, fleeting glimpses or chance encounters and they're over with.
It's interesting you
But there
said
have been some reported accounts of aggressive Bigfoot attacks over the years.
yeah. I never heard of that, so that's interesting. A lot of the footage that you see, the videos, Bigfoot doesn't even acknowledge the person. It's like he's just walking, in a straight line and like there's no, I mean, nothing. You may have seen something, but I've never seen any footage of it acknowledging the presence of somebody standing there videoing, unless the people are like so far away, he doesn't notice. But I mean, to me, that seems interesting as well. It's almost like, you wonder if their vision or hearing is impaired, maybe, or you know what I mean, or they're just, or maybe it could be that lapse of time, what we're seeing for a split second, and they're not knowing where they're at. So it's interesting that people have been, and I can understand it being provoked. If I saw a Bigfoot, I would run. I would not be a good, because what would you do, Eric? What would you do if you actually came encounter with a Bigfoot?
First of all, I probably wouldn't run. I've been looking for these things for so long. I'd probably want to watch it and started coming after me. Then probably I'd run, but I'm fat and old, so it probably would catch me and eat me for dinner. But I would want to observe it as long as I could, try to study it and see what it's going to do.
You think you'd be scared?
Most people don't know what they're seeing. No, I've had some pretty harrowing encounters, if you want to call them that. At first, I was nervous and thinking, "Oh my God, this thing's gonna rip me apart, whatever it is." But I spent so many years in the woods, and I've never had anything other than rocks being thrown at me and sticks being thrown at me. I've never had anything really aggressive happen to me or make me feel like, okay, I got to go now. This thing's gonna hurt me. I've always been more inquisitive and curious, and ran after the noises and ran after the sounds, or hear branches breaking. I want to see it. So I'm not going to run. I'm going to probably chase after it, which probably isn't a good idea. I wouldn't recommend it, but that's just what I would do.
So Lauren kind of asked the same question I did. I'm sorry, Lauren, I didn't see it earlier, about Bigfoot being an interdimensional being, and we had already talked about that. So I apologize, Lauren. But she has a bigger one, a better question. Has anyone ever spotted a Bigfoot family? They always seem to be alone.
There have been reports of Bigfoot, if you want to call them pods or tribes or families, whatever you want to call them, what appears to be a male, female, and offspring. I've investigated cases of multiple creatures being seen in a location together. So yes, there have been sightings of families of Bigfoot. They're not as common as the individual sightings. They seem to be more common than the family pod, if you will, of what's been seen and recognized. But they do have to have a family if they have a breeding population. There's got to be Papa Bigfoot and baby Bigfoot in order for the species to survive. If we're dealing with a flesh and blood terrestrial animal, there has to be a breeding population.
Are there theories behind that, the breeding process, or what goes on there? Because I mean, you think a lot about, deer are overpopulated, and this and that. So I mean, are there theories on that whole process? Does anybody have any?
Yeah, I think they go to movies and have dinner, and then hang out, and then go for a drive in the country at night. I don't think
Harry and the Hendersons. They go watch Harry and the Hendersons.
Yeah, at the drive-in theater. Now, I don't think there's really any theories of how they procreate or how they have a low breeding population. There have been numbers that have been thrown out there. Jeff Miller threw an idea out there of about 3,000 to 5,000 of these creatures being in existence. If you spread that over the entire United States, that's just here in the United States. That's not a very large population, where Pennsylvania has millions of deer.
Yeah.
So if they have a breeding population, and there are researchers who speculate that once the males grow up, they kind of leave their family and go looking for another family or another female to hook up with, and get
Typical.
together
It's
and
the
all that.
same.
Bouncing
Like
wow
the
wow.
males, like the human males.
Yeah, right. Right. So um, that's some of the ideas that have been thrown out there. Is there are rogue single males looking for females and other pods to hook up with and connect with, and you know but there's not a very large population of these animals. It's a very small number.
Yeah, and how, I mean, is how do you decipher, or how would you say there's a male and a female? Is
Well,
there a
people
way to?
have claimed they've seen genitalia on these creatures.
Oh, I did not
The
know that.
yeah, the 1967 Patterson Gimlin film that everyone's familiar with, they say that is a female Bigfoot because you can see breasts hanging down in front of it, swinging as the creature walks. And the film has
Oh,
been studied pretty intensely, and that's the people who filmed it that day said it was a female creature that they saw. So there have been other investigators and other researchers that have said, yeah, we could tell it was a male. So, I mean, as crazy as that sounds, you would have to think there would be ways to identify the males and the females. If they're closely related to a hominid or a humanoid species, they're going to be like us.
yeah. Rosie is asking, is there any record or information on the life expectancy of the Bigfoots?
Um, there really isn't. Um, I don't think anybody's put out there a timeline of how long these things live. I know the great apes, I believe, have a life expectancy of 40 to 50 years, maybe 60 years. And I haven't studied the great ape population or those primates in depth. But perhaps these things live as long as humans live, maybe 60 to 70 years, and they die out. I know from researching in certain areas that I've received reports of similar looking creatures decades apart. So there's an area in southwestern Pennsylvania, not far from the campgrounds, called Washington Springs, where this creature was seen that had a facial wound on its face, and about
Oh,
10 or 20 years later, the same creature was seen with grayish colored hair and the same facial wound, like a
oh
scar.
wow.
So it's hard to speculate how long these animals live, and it'd be nice to know that we could try to track them a little better and see, how they die out and where they're dying when. But we don't have an idea. We do know they live a little while.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it is hard. I mean, the only reason we know about anything is because we have the privilege in being able to watch like lions and any type of an animal. There are people that go and study these animals and watch them and follow prides, and they watch their, they just sit back and they document everything. And unfortunately, we don't have the capability to do that. So
Exactly.
yeah, so it is going to be hard to um, really get a definitive data or anything like that unless you find one and you kind of just say you're going to follow it, and learn about it. Um, what would you say to anybody that thinks? I mean, you always got to worry, that there's going to be some crazy lunatic that, let's just say comes across the Bigfoot and then does like the worst thing possible. You know what I mean? And because you think there's going to be people out there that want to study the anatomy, want to study the tissue, want to study this, they want to do that. You know what I mean? I mean, that's what I'm afraid of. Like, because you wouldn't want the only Bigfoot to ever be found and then somebody shoot and kill it. I wouldn't anyway.
Well, unfortunately, that's the only way we're going to prove that this animal exists is to capture a live species, which I don't see happening, or to come across a naturally deceased animal that was hit by a car or died in the woods, which again I don't see one happening, or a hunter or even one of those lunatics you mentioned going out there and shooting one. But I don't think that's going to happen either, because a lot of hunters that I've spoken to claim that they've put a rifle on this thing and was going to shoot, but felt it might be a human. It looked too human in characteristics. So what if it was a person in a suit and a costume, and you pulled that trigger and you killed a human? You're going to jail for manslaughter.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
people are afraid, well, maybe that is a person in a suit. So I don't know of anybody that I can say I know personally that has shot at one of these things, but I've talked to hunters over the years that have claimed they've seen them through their scopes, or they've been in a tree stand and watched one walk relatively close by, and they thought maybe it was a human, a hairy human, or it was somebody in a suit. So there's so many risks involved. I don't advocate killing these things, going out and hunting them down, but science requires a body, and that's the only way to prove scientifically and physically that these animals exist, is to have a live or dead specimen.
Right. Yeah. Which is unfortunate. And I agree with you. I don't think a live one would come willingly. To me, they're so wild. I can't see detaining something. You know, that has such that that wild animal instinct. And not knowing anything about it. I mean, that would be such a huge risk. I don't know. That's just me. Um, so let's talk about the the Pennsylvania Bigfoot Camping Adventure coming up in September. 5th, I don't know, it's 5th, 6th, or 6th, 7th. I don't know what the Friday is. Oh, I saw my 2023
6th and
calendar.
7th.
The 6th and the 7th. I saw my 2020. I'm looking at 2023. I'm like, wait a minute. So September 6th and the 7th, and it's very reasonable. There's cabins that people can rent, or I don't know if they're all rented yet, but there's cabins people can rent. I know me and my peaches got a cabin, thank God, thanks to Jossie, who was very persistent with getting in a cabin for the weekend. She said they're all rented. She would know. But so Friday night, I know, so it's $50 for the whole weekend to participate in the events and stuff. I know Friday night there is a hike, a Bigfoot hike. Is this an investigation, or what can we expect coming to the Bigfoot adventure, camping adventure?
Well, let me take a step back for a second and give you a little bit of history of the event. It kind of explains why we do what we do. From 1999 to about 2011, I hosted a Bigfoot conference, much like the paranormal conferences of today, where we had Bigfoot speakers come in and talk about the subject and educate. And they were blasted and fun. But I always got asked if I did Bigfoot outings and expeditions and took people in the woods. And I don't do that. There's too much liability and risk, and it really didn't seem feasible at the time. But over the years, people kept asking about doing an outing where they could participate and learn how to hunt for Bigfoot. So in Ohio, back in the mid to late, I want to say maybe 2005 to 2007, somewhere in the time frame, there was a group that put together a camping outing where you could do just that. Go out on a Bigfoot expedition, go out on hikes looking for Bigfoot. They teach you how to make casts, what equipment to use. And I thought that was a great idea. And they called it the Bigfoot Adventure Weekends, I think they were called. And they were over in Salt Fork, Ohio, in southeastern Ohio. And I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a great concept. And nobody was doing that here in Pennsylvania. So I thought, well, why not take my experience of organizing conferences and put it together for all those people who wanted to go on a Bigfoot expedition, have them come to an event, learn from experienced researchers who they can hear lecture on their research and their field techniques, and present workshops and that type of thing to educate the public. And then in the evening, take those people out on hikes in areas of the forest where there have been Bigfoot sightings and Bigfoot activity and that sort of thing. So they kind of get a well-rounded experience where they're not only going to hear from experts who research and investigate, they're going to get a chance to get their hands on workshops to learn how to cast tracks or
Oh,
what
cool.
techniques to use in the field. And that night, Friday night and Saturday night, we have 4 different hikes set up where we take a group of people out into the forest, and we're going to be traveling not far from the campgrounds, but into areas where there have been sightings and activity and footprint discoveries, and let them get that feeling of what it's like to be in the woods as a Bigfoot researcher with other experienced researchers. You can ask questions, you can use some of the equipment, some of the thermal FLIRs, you can do knocks on trees, you can do your own howls and calls to see if you get an answer back. And you get that experience in the woods at night, what it's like doing research. And we thought, okay, that's a great idea to put the education part of it, the entertainment part together, the actual experience of going out in the woods, and put that all together. And why not give back to the community by making it a charity fundraiser event?
That's
So
awesome.
it's all those things encompassed. You've got the guest speakers. We've got 8 amazing guest speakers, and they're all well-rounded. We've got, Kenny Biddle. He's a well-known skeptic. He's coming in to talk about why Bigfoot doesn't exist. We've got
Shocker.
researchers who spent decades in the field investigating. Yeah, we've got investigators coming in. They've spent decades in the field who are going to talk about why they think Bigfoot's real or some of their cases. So you're going to get a well-rounded look, or listen, I should say, from the speakers as to the subject. So you can learn all about the subject, pros and cons.
Yeah.
And then we got 2 workshop presenters that are very well experienced. They're going to be putting on workshops so you can get your hands on and learn how to cast tracks and use equipment. And so it's going to be fun for everybody.
Yeah. I did see, so I have a dear love in my heart, Ron Murphy. He was
Mhm.
actually commenting earlier, and I guess he's going to be there, which I didn't know. So now I'm excited because I love Ron. So that'll be cool to get to. This is going to be a whole different. I'm used to all the paracons and all the paranormal stuff, so this is going to be a totally new, fun, and exciting experience, and I can't wait to come and then share it with everybody. I definitely, I'm looking forward to it. We all are, actually. It's all we've been talking about. It's like how excited we are about it. Um and what was the other thing I was going to ask you? So where do people go to get tickets for it?
Well, tickets are on sale right now. They can get tickets in advance by going to our website, which is PA for Pennsylvania, PA Bigfoot Camping Adventure.com, all one word. And they can purchase tickets online. They're very reasonable. We're not charging an arm and a leg. $50 for 2 days, or 25 for Friday, 30 for Saturday. Children under 12 are free, admitted free with a paid accompanied adult. There's going to be food vendors. We're going to have craft vendors. They're making all kinds of different Bigfoot T-shirts, soap, all kinds of collectibles, Bigfoot related vendors. The speakers will be on hand. As you mentioned, Ron, a very dear friend of mine, he'll be there speaking. He'll have a tent set up selling his books.
Yay.
You can interact with Ron and talk with him. And we have a couple of celebrities coming to the event this year as well. Every year every time we do this is our 4th event. Every time we do this, we bring in celebrities. So we're going to have Ken Gerhard from a variety of different TV shows. You've seen him probably on The Proof is Out There on the History Channel, or the Travel Channel. He's been on so many different documentary TV shows. It's hard to keep track of what Ken does, but he's a well-known cryptozoologist. We've got Jeff and Willie from the TV show Mountain Monsters. Those
cool.
lovable hillbillies from West Virginia are going to be joining us. They're a lot of fun and great guys. And we've got Ronnie LeBlanc from Expedition Bigfoot. He's going to be coming down from Massachusetts, joining us for the weekend as well. So if you like those guys on TV, you've interacted with them, or you know them, yeah, he's going to be there too. You get a chance to meet with those guys and have conversations with them, meet them one-on-one. Food trucks. We've got Sasquatch Karaoke going to happen Friday night and Saturday night for those who don't go on the hikes. So if you like to sing and party, you're going to have a chance to do that as well. It's a little bit of everything for everybody.
That's awesome. This sounds like it's going to be so fun. I can't wait. Like, I literally cannot wait. I didn't know. Yeah, I didn't know Ronnie LeBlanc was going to be there. See, that's how much I know. Like, I didn't know he was going to be there either. It sounds like it's going to be so fun and such a different experience, you know? I wanted to ask you really quick. Uh, oh, like when you were saying, because when you were saying about like taking people out to, you know, sightings and stuff, do you find that there's usually um more than like one sighting in one area over time? I always thought that Bigfoot kind of like traveled, so I didn't realize that maybe, you know, that there was like the same, like it would come to the same area over and over. Is that one of the things that you find that you get reports?
Um, Sometimes yes, sometimes we get clusters in the same area, the same vicinity, and we may get one report from that vicinity, and other people may have seen the creature on different occasions and different times, but just reluctant to report their experience. So um, they seem to have like a home range, like a bear. A bear has 100-mile area home range that it kind of stays in, and I think that's what these animals do. These Bigfoot creatures do is they stay in a home range, and I don't know how large their home range would be, but consistently over the years, the area where we're having the camping adventure has had dozens and dozens and dozens of sightings and experiences dating back well into the 1940s and 1930s.
That's
So
cool.
there's a long history of Bigfoot sightings in the area. Matter of fact, the campground has had sightings and footprint discoveries around the campground. In the area that we're going to on the night hikes on Friday and Saturday have had sightings and footprint discoveries. So there's been Bigfoot activity in the area for decades.
Are we allowed to run?
If you want, just don't go running into the woods by yourself because we may not never find you.
Oh my god, I'm terrified. Oh my god. Okay. I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. um so all right. Now just a couple more before you go. Do you believe in ghost UFOs and other cryptids?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The house you're seeing me in now is haunted.
Oh,
We've
cool.
had paranormal activity here since we moved in 2017. That's a whole show in itself. I could talk about all the weird stuff that's gone on in my house. I've seen what I think is a UFO in January of last year and actually caught it on my iPhone. And I've had UFO researchers look at it and examine it, and they say it's not a plane or a helicopter. Um, I have dabbled into UFO research and investigating cases with Stan. The paranormal stuff, I try to stay away from the paranormal stuff because I really don't need to go looking for it. I mean, I live it in my
Right.
house,
Sure.
but
Sure.
I've gone because of the paranormal conferences I've been to and some of the events I've been to. I've gone to haunted locations like in Gettysburg, Penhurst, the haunted Buffalo train station, gosh, Mansfield, so many different haunted locations I've been to over the years from lecturing and speaking. And I belong to a paranormal group as well. I'm not as active as I should be in it, but my main focus is more on the cryptids than it is on paranormal or UFO. I consider myself an enthusiast. I follow it, I read it, I watch the shows, I investigate when the time permits. But I'm so busy doing the Bigfoot stuff that that's where most of my time's focused.
That's awesome. Good for you. And one last question before I let you go, because I forgot to ask this. I know it's going to sound like I'm digressing and going backwards, but I want to make sure I ask. And you might have said this, but I missed it. When was the actual, or does anybody know when the actual first reported sighting of a Bigfoot ever?
Oh goodness, that's hard to that's hard to really pinpoint because we have documented stories and books, and we have Native American lore and all that stuff. There's newspaper articles that I have that date back to the 1700s.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
so it's really hard to pinpoint the very first one because there's such a long history that just dates back hundreds of years. And I mentioned the Native American lore and legends. That's in the different tribes, that's well recorded, and there's a long history of that. Newspaper articles, as I mentioned, I have one from 1766, and I have a lot of newspaper articles from the 1800s all over the globe. The modern Bigfoot stuff, I would say in our lifetime, Bigfoot got its name in 1958. So before that, it was documented as wild man or wild women or wild person of the woods. And as I mentioned earlier, there's different names for these animals in different parts of the country and the world. So there's a long history of these animals existing and being experienced and cited and reported. It's hard to pinpoint one particular date.
And if money was no option, what spot would you pick to spend a month and do Bigfoot research?
Right here in my own state.
That's awesome.
I've been to Washington State. I've been to Oregon and Northern California. I love those areas. They're beautiful. And I can definitely see there's something out there just by being in the territory. But with the history here in southwestern Pennsylvania, an area known as the Chestnut Ridge, where I research and where the camping adventure is going to be, this is where I want to be, because to me, this is where I've had my experiences and where I've investigated almost 90% of my cases. So if I had unlimited resources, unlimited time, I would be out in the woods full time. I'd probably get a cabin up in the woods and just live there and, just spend all my time in the woods. That's what I would want to do.
I've heard of Bigfoot claims coming from Gettysburg.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard that?
Yep. And I've investigated cases from Adams County. From east of Gettysburg, there's a state park there that I've investigated. We spent time there in the late 2000s. And the name of I think it's Caledonia. Gettysburg itself, there's been reports of Bigfoot being seen on the battlefields.
My mom, who nothing with cryptids or anything like that. She is a enthusiast, a paranormal enthusiast. She's not into investigating and all that stuff. But they were walking down Big Round Top, and when they were walking down Big Round Top, she explains that she heard. This was way before I had my experience, but she was saying how they heard this god-awful scream, screech, yell, bark, growl, all mixed into one. Like it sounded like something they've never heard before, and that was on Big Round Top. I said, "What did you do?" She's like, "We started running." I don't blame you. I'll blame you. I would have ran too. All right, one more. What is your second favorite cryptid?
That's actually a toss-up. I really enjoy the Mothman phenomenon to Point Pleasant, West Virginia. I've looked into that extensively. I haven't researched any cases of that, but I've read and studied up on it, and I'm very good friends with some of the folks that do the research in Point Pleasant. I've been there many times. I've been to the TNT area. It's a fascinating area. The UFO history in the Ohio Valley, the phenomena they saw of the Mothman, that's probably tied with the Thunderbird reports that we get in Pennsylvania. The huge 8 to 20 foot wingspan black birds that are seen soaring in the skies over southwestern Pennsylvania. That fascinates me too, because I've investigated some of those cases. I've talked to witnesses, and they've truly seen a bird they've never seen before with enormous proportions. So wow. Those two would probably be a very close tie, the Thunderbird and the Mothman of Point Pleasant, West Virginia.
It almost sounds like the Thunderbird. It can also, like you said, there's different names for Bigfoot, Yeti, whatever, in the different areas. You're like, so maybe they call it Mothman over here, but we're calling it Thunderbird over here. Maybe it's like, you know what I'm saying? Like if the names are coming from where it's seen.
It could be. What they're describing at Point Pleasant is more like a winged hominid type of creature.
Oh, okay.
With long legs, long arms, wings that protrude from the back of its back, glowing red eyes, where the Thunderbird looks like a giant black bird. Oh. Now, there were cases in Point Pleasant where people were seeing a very large bird-like animal They thought, could have been a pterodactyl or pterodon or something of something that's gone extinct. But other people have said it looks more man-like with wings. And so who knows what they're seeing in Point Pleasant? It could be something an offshoot of the Thunderbird. I'm not sure.
Was there a movie done about that?
Yeah, the Mothman Prophecies with Richard Gere.
That was the Point Pleasant?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
It was loosely based on the Mothman Prophecies written by, his name just flew out of my head, and I hate when that happens. He was a well-known investigator in Point Pleasant, and it'll come to me right after the show's over. I'm so embarrassed because I can't remember his name. But
is that Richard Gere played?
Yeah, his name was John Keel.
Okay.
And he wrote the book, The Mothman Prophecies, and he wrote a bunch of other paranormal-related themed books. And Richard Gere's character was based off of John Keel. And so it's an interesting story. The movie story is loosely based on what happened in Point Pleasant. Filmed in Pennsylvania, for anybody that's interested, but it was based on what happened in Point Pleasant. There have been countless documentaries on the Mothman. You can find them all over YouTube and all over different streaming channels. You can watch them, but it's a fascinating topic for sure.
Absolutely. I loved it. And I loved our discussion tonight. It was amazing. Eric, you're amazing. I love you. Thank you so much for coming on.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah.
Long time coming.
Yes, absolutely. I'm so excited. You have no idea how excited I was about this. So I want to thank you so much. I know you're busy, but I would love to have you on again, maybe after the event or something, where, we can talk about everything that happened and talk more about your haunted house.
Sure. I'd be happy to come back anytime. We'll figure something out. But yeah, if you want to come out to the camping adventure, if I can plug the website again,
Absolutely.
It's listed there on the screen, PA-BigfootCampingAdventure.com. We are trying to, as I mentioned, this is a charity fundraiser, so we're raising money for a couple of local charities in the area. So come out, have a great time, meet some great people, learn something about Bigfoot, maybe have an experience, find out what it's like to be a Bigfoot researcher. Come and join us. And come out and meet me, come see you and all the peaches, and it's going to be a blast. We're going to have a good time.
A lot of fun. Absolutely. Eric, thank you for your time, sir. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Very knowledgeable, and I respect you, what you've done for the field. So thank you so much. And then that's it. We're going to sign off. And see you guys next week. I have John Zaffis coming on. So hopefully you guys check that out. John Zaffis will be here. Other than that, make sure you check out the Pennsylvania Bigfoot Society. Go get your tickets for the camping adventure. Like Eric said, it's $50. And it sounds like it's going to be such a cool experience and any time. So I'm great. We're going to be involved with it. So thank you again, Eric, for all your research, your hard work, and sharing it with us.
You got it.
You have a good night, dear.
You too.
All right, guys. Till next week, make sure you guys check in. John Zaffis will be here with me. So another great pioneer in the paranormal field, Mr. John Zaffis, has agreed to come on, and he will be here next week. So make sure you guys check that out. Until next week, have a great weekend, y'all.